YouTube. Hey, everybody, this is Katie Cross. I am here live to narrate an audiobook with you. So, I am a young adult fantasy author and I narrate my own books. We are narrating Mildred's Resistance today, and we'll be on chapter 30, I think, through 34, which is very exciting. So, we'll do chapters 30 through 34 today. I might try and squeeze another one in, but I usually only have an hour to get this done. So, let's get started. You guys are here for audiobooks. Wow, that brightens up a lot. I just got back from excuse me, I just got back from a hike. So it might take my voice a second to get in the flow. Chapter 30, Elitism on the Rise. My teaching schedule for the next month will be quite tight, Mildred announced to her evening class. If any of you have questions, a copy of it will be on the board. A piece of chalk drew out a large square and split it into the rows of a calendar on the chalkboard behind her. The quiet shuffle of movement and paper accompanied the occasional screech of the chalk, as it dictated. I like that cadence. I took a breath at the wrong space. On the chalkboard behind her. The quiet shuffle of movement and paper accompanied the occasional screech of the chalk as it dictated the schedule of education. Oh, I'm going to redo that too. I stumbled over education. The quiet shuffle of movement and paper accompanied the occasional screech of the chalk as it dictated the schedule of education for the second month of summer. Due to the number of witches requesting classes, I've asked 3 other students to teach reading, writing, and mathematics. Lavinia will teach literature this month, while I teach magical potions and cures. She looked out on a sea of 30 anxious faces. I said faces. She looked out on a sea of 30 anxious faces, commissioning other teachers from amongst the servants who had demonstrated impressive skill in the classes had been one of Mildred's greatest ideas. But her greatest idea by far had been to appoint Lavinia as her assistant. The girl ruled the organization of the class schedule with an iron thumb, freeing up more time for Mildred to answer questions and help students with incantation pronunciation. They don't dare I gotta practice that. They don't dare antagonize me now that I'm one of your assistants, Miss Mildred. I think Lavinia has a deeper. She actually has a little more of like a high-pitched hysterical tone. Okay. I'm going to redo that with Lavinia, and I actually need to put my phone on silent. I forgot. There we go. We're going to redo Lavinia there. They don't dare antagonize me now that I'm one of your assistants, Miss Mildred, Lavinia had said one evening, jamming a fist into her open palm. Then now I'll answer right to you and just scare all of them. The chalk had continued to fill in the blanks on the calendar, while Mildred eyed the syllabus for the evening. The rise of a hand on the front row stopped her. Miss Mildred, squeaked Alice, an upper floor maid with shiny hair and a smudge of freckles. May we ask you a question? Of course. Alice hesitated, and the maid next to her nudged her in the ribs. It's about this, she said, lifting a clipping from a news scroll. Mildred stared at it in surprise. If a witch cut apart a news scroll, she would save the article, but the scroll couldn't be used again. For a poor maid like Alice, a news scroll was a rare luxury. I read this article in the Chatham Chatterer yesterday, Alice said when Mildred took the article from her. I almost didn't see it because it was at the end of the scroll. We, all of us, read it out loud before class and wondered if you could help us understand what it meant. It may not be news to anyone in the political ring at Chatham Castle, but it's come to the attention of many business witches in the network that elitism, a political belief that the division of classes is essential to the proper functioning of a society. Ooh, stumbled over that. Let's try that again. Many businesses that elitism, a political belief that the division of classes is essential to the proper functioning of a society, is on the rise. My high witch said I was in the lower class, reports a grocer from Murphy. He wouldn't invite me to his house because I wasn't part of the upper class, said it wouldn't be right. Unfortunately, this isn't the only example of elitism to be found in the network. The closure of half the common schools years ago, a move reported to be driven by necessary budget cuts, sounded the first alarm for Jared in the Middle Covens. Closing the common schools was just the beginning, he said. They're trying to dumb us down so they can take over, that's all. Just you wait, they'll close them all eventually. While there's no definitive leader of the elitist movement so far, it's hard to deny that recent actions, such as Councilmember Evelyn's use of guardians to subdue nonviolent protests, have come under close scrutiny lately. Evelyn is not alone, however. Similar tactics have been employed by both Councilmember Gloria and Councilmember Grant. Is the gap between the rich and the poor widening? Is elitism spreading through the council? Or are we looking at circumstantial occurrences with no root in certainty? Mildred folded the article in half with a cold feeling in the pit of her stomach. Alfred Quinton, the editor of The Chatterer, usually extrapolated for pages. The brevity of the article likely meant he was too nervous to say more. If witches outside Chatham Castle had begun to notice elitist attitudes, going so far as to write about it in the news scroll, it signaled a frightening reality. "What are your questions, Alice?" Mildred asked, buying time to organize her thoughts so she didn't feed her students fear. Alice's front teeth bit into her bottom lip. "What does it mean?" "Elitism is a belief system that assumes wealth breeds an ability." That transition between voices got me breathy. "Elitism is a belief system that assumes wealth breeds an ability to rule what some might call the lower class or the workers. In a pure elitist system, the workers would spend most of their time not honoring, honing. Hey, everyone. Called the lower class. In a pure elitist system, the workers would spend most of their time honing a single talent, such as blacksmithing, instead of pursuing an overall education. I believe some of you have heard the claims of elitists here in the castle that maids don't need to know. There we go. Here in the castle, that maids don't need to know how to read to do their jobs. They believe that education, the economy, and government should be left to the upper class. "It's bollocks," someone shouted in the back. "Indeed," she said with a grim nod. "They hold that educating the upper class to regulate the business side of things will keep a network running smoothly, that it gives the lower class a chance to build their skills, not their schools. Running smoothly, that it gives the lower class a chance to build their skills in a single area and work according to their talents and abilities. Those are just the basic premises anyway." Those are the basic. I added just. We're going to take it out so my proofers don't have to flag it. "Those are the basic premises anyway. We're just as smart. They wouldn't know how to work if it hit them in the face. Who says they're born smarter just because they eat with silver spoons? Movements such as these rarely advance this far," Mildred said, waving the news scroll clipping. "Several factors must align. First, they need diffuse, not too diffuse. Several factors must align. First, they need diffuse support throughout the upper class. Second, they need an unstable network structure. And third," she paused for a moment, "they rely on the workers, or the lower class as they put it, not to fight back." A deafening silence permeated the room. A burly kitchen worker named Todd stood against the back wall and spoke in a deep voice that reverberated through the room. "How do we fight back?" Mildred motioned around them. "Just like this. You educate yourself. You don't give in to their demands. You form a group and stand up as one power. You show them that we are every bit as strong and intelligent as they are. If the elitists take over the council, will you lead us against them, Miss Mildred?" Todd asked. Mildred chortled. "It won't happen. But if it does." She halted, mouth open. All of them stared back at her in quiet expectation. "That's an awfully big promise to make." "You said it won't happen, though, so you shouldn't be frightened to make it," Todd said. "I know it would help me sleep better at night if I knew we had someone on our side." I like that cadence. Hey, everybody. "I know it would help me sleep better at night if I knew we had someone on our side that was one of us, and also one of them." "Am I one of them?" she wondered. "Me too," Alice said, and a small chorus of similar replies echoed in the room. Mildred drew in a deep breath of surprise. Although she wouldn't admit it, making such a promise terrified her. The elitists already showed far more progress than she'd expected, and there were so few on the council that would support her in an effort against the majority that she wasn't even sure a resistance would work. Not to mention the ugly business of Evelyn's role in this ungainly group. I said, I want to scoot back a little bit and listen to one little word. When I said elitists, the S kind of trails. I want to make sure. Uh, okay, it sounds okay. I just want to make sure the S doesn't trail it too far because it's really sibilant and like difficult to listen to. I should check it. Mildred intimately knew Evelyn's quick mind and powerful magic, and she wasn't the only strong, talented witch on the council. Mildred wasn't sure she could fight her. She could fight, not best. Talented witch on the council. Mildred wasn't sure she could fight her best friend in such a way. Miss Mildred would never leave. Oh, I'm going to redo that just because it started too low. Lavinia's higher. On the council. Mildred wasn't sure she could fight her best friend in such a way. Miss Mildred would never leave us without a fight, Lavinia said from where she sat in the front corner. She'll help us. The entire classroom stared at her with the same round, hopeful eyes. There's nothing to be done, she thought with regret. I couldn't just leave them to the wolves, could I? Perhaps they see something in me that I don't. If the elitists take over, then yes, I'll help. But don't fear. This article doesn't mean they've permeated the council with enough strength to gain traction. It's not a good sign, she said, but it's not the end either. How does something like this happen? Is that... I'm going to redo it. I think you can understand her, but it's not super clear and easy. How does something like this happen? Alice asked. Slowly, Mildred said, thinking of her first conversation with Martin. And due to the apathy of those who could stop it but don't. That won't happen, though, will it, Miss Mildred? Todd asked. Because you've already promised us you'd help us stop it, not help to stop it. Miss Mildred. Where is this at? Where did that go? There we go. Sorry, I have to just redo it. Will it, Miss Mildred? Todd asked. Because you've already promised us you'd help us to stop it. You've already promised us you'd help us stop it. There we go. There's so many us's with verbs that it messed me up. Todd asked. Because you've already promised us you'd help us stop it, and you've already been resisting the elitists by teaching us all along. They don't even know how smart we are. A chorus of agreement rippled through the room, taking Mildred by surprise. She schooled her expression into one of placid disinterest, though her heart hammered in her chest. They were right, of course. Yes, but I can't do anything if I have a bunch of ignorant students to work with. Crack open your books. We still have much to learn today. Awesome. All right. One of the things I love about this book is it has really short, fast chapters. So when you're reading it, you feel like a total rock star because you're reading really fast. And then when we're narrating, it makes it really fast also. So I just write out the book stem here and the chapter, and then we go to the next one. All right. So this next one is called A Pile of Ash. And it is a little bit longer. So it's twice as long as the last chapter. Chapter 31, A Pile of Ash. On the afternoon of her 28th birthday, a letter floated to Evelyn's desk with the slow drift of a falling feather. She glanced at the unfamiliar handwriting and thought about disregarding it like she ignored the hundreds of envelopes. Disregarding it. Let's redo that. She glanced at the unfamiliar handwriting and thought about disregarding it like she'd ignored the hundreds of envelopes. Oh my gosh, I always do this wrong. Okay, I always say envelopes and enveloping. I get them mixed up. She glanced at the unfamiliar handwriting and thought about disregarding it like she oh my gosh, you guys. Some days are just tough. Hi, everyone. She glanced at the unfamiliar handwriting and thought about disregarding it like she'd ignored the hundreds of envelopes now cluttering the floor around her. Likely another birthday message, or a plea from Mildred to join her and Stella for their birthday tea. No time, Millie. She'd already written, but Mildred was stubborn and insisted on the holiness of tradition. Evelyn had started ignoring most of her correspondence. Thinking of her friends left Evelyn feeling her office was as lonely as a tomb. May was off in Ashley, taking care of something. Evelyn worked fanatically to catch up with the work she'd fallen behind on while finishing the new law, like bribing Norbert, the head of finances, with 50 pentacles again. He has a real racket going, the miserable cretin. He'll be one of the first I fire when I take over, she muttered, right after Porter. The envelope fluttered in front of her. Evelyn snatched it from the air and tore through the button-sized wax seal, glad for a momentary distraction. The letter practically unfolded itself, revealing 2 lines. Nell is dying and requests one last visit from you. If you are so inclined, come immediately." The hand was neat and proper, which meant it was unlikely that it was from a servant. She promptly burned it, watching it curl at the edges, turning from white to yellow to brown, and then disintegrating into deep black ash, not just black ash. And then disintegrating it into deep, not disintegrating it. White to yellow to brown, and then disintegrating into deep black ash that tumbled to the floor. The words, "Nella's dying," hadn't surprised Evelyn. Everyone knew she wouldn't live much longer. But Evelyn's body felt cold, starting in her core and spreading out to her fingertips. Let her die alone. She folded her arms across her chest. The way she left me when Porter attacked my honor. A little voice in the back of her mind nagged her incessantly until she gave in and pushed away from her messy desk, littered with an empty tea tray and unanswered letters. Evelyn stood outside Nell's personal quarters for nearly 10 minutes, her sweaty hands clenched at her side. She remembered arguing with Mama about meeting the old high priestess, and the numb pain deep in her stomach when Nell told her that her Mama was dead. Am I losing my mind? She thought often of Mama, but never relived the old days with such detail. The memories of her lost parents flashed by in a blur of indistinct colors and emotions. She reviewed them with a disconnected air, as if they were scenes in the life of a stranger. After a few moments of seeing Nell's affectionate gaze again and again, remembering tea and cookies and dancing and laughter, Evelyn forced the memories away. They cramped her heart. Some days, losing Mama and Papa still felt as fresh as the whisper living in her ear. Avenge us, Evelyn. Don't let this happen again. Only the voice sounded like... Oh, I have a description about the voice after the voice, so I just have to go back and match it. Avenge us, Evelyn. Don't let this happen again. Only the voice sounded like May instead of Mama. No matter how hard she tried, Evelyn couldn't remember Mama's voice anymore. It seemed May had taken over everything, even her memories. Like Grant, May had slowly been. It seemed May had taken over everything, even her memories. Like Grant, May had slowly been losing her appeal. She had... Wait, did I say that right? Like Grant, May had slowly... Yeah, I did say it right. I just gotta check. Sometimes what I hear isn't what I say. She seemed to dominate even the smallest decisions. I shan't think of this. I shan't think of any of this? Oh, I have something italicized that shouldn't be. That kind of threw me off. Okay, let's try this again. I shan't think of this. Evelyn, any of this. My goodness, you guys, I'm awful today. I shan't think of any of this, Evelyn thought, blinking away tears. Not now. It will just weaken me. I'll start a new central network, one that I want, not what May wants. That's what I must focus on, for I've given up far too much to back away now. Life would go on without Nell. She'd eventually forget Nell's chalky scent and the lackluster eyes that waned from depression, just like she had been forgetting Mama. It hurt, but it was necessary. We must make personal sacrifices to bring about a better central network, the way Esmelda did, May reminded her constantly. Evelyn wondered if Esmelda ever suffered pain in this way. When Evelyn stepped into Nell's room unannounced, the smells of death swamped her. Mentholatum, peppermint, and something stale, like wood that had been sitting in the sun for too long. Her Highness isn't well, Leslie said, stepping in Evelyn's path with her two buck teeth and overly large eyes. Evelyn stopped. Leslie stuck her bottom jaw up and out in determination, as if that would frighten Evelyn off. I invited you because she keeps repeating your name, but the moment you upset her... Let me hear that again. I kind of go, you upset her? I say it kind of weird. Peyton your name, but the moment you upset her, I'll turn you out. So the letter had been from a servant. Odd. The writing had looked unusually neat. Evelyn knew Leslie. She'd worked with Nell for several years, and she didn't recall her having been educated. Nell's dying, isn't she? Evelyn asked carelessly, her eyes moving to the lumpy figure in bed. My presence won't make it happen faster. Unless you break her heart again, Leslie replied with impressive resolution, like you've done so often in the past. 10 minutes, then you'll have to go. Evelyn headed for the bed, ignoring the pompous maid but secretly grateful to have an excuse not to linger. She couldn't even say why she'd come, as it would surely mean another harrowing trip down the dark highways of her past. Nell's hair lay fluffy and white now, like strings of curling snowflakes. Her breath rose and fell with erratic sighs. The long, varied emotions of comfort and love Evelyn attached to Nell burrowed up through the iron layers of her heart. What am I doing? That is not the accent I want. It's just a little off. I'm going to try it again. What am I doing? She thought, even as her feet propelled her toward the bed. Nell hasn't been part of my life since she betrayed me. So long ago I can hardly remember when. Not remembering the very day and moment of Nell's deep betrayal felt strange. Evelyn had held on to it for years, trapping it inside her the way she'd boxed up so many other things. Perhaps the bitterness toward Nell had finally just consumed her, integrating itself into the fabric of her soul. She couldn't even look at Nell without both disgust and longing. Nell is weak, May's voice said. She can't help us. Evelyn shoved the voice away, wishing it would stop cropping up all the time. Leslie bustled around the High Priestess's bedroom, keeping a sharp eye on Evelyn. Nell was fading, as fragile as a gust of wind. I don't know what to say to you, Evelyn murmured under her breath, staring at Nell's still form. A dizzy wave passed over her, and she forced herself to pull in a deep breath instead of holding it. She didn't like the situation at all. You look terrible, Evelyn said stiffly, standing just out of reach. Nell stirred but didn't rouse. I've come, actually, not sure why. Probably because I don't like that probably. Probably because I never had a chance to say goodbye to Mama or Papa. Find Evie, Nell mumbled, her eyelids fluttering open and closed. Please get Evie. Don't want to die without her. To Evelyn's great surprise, Nell's eyes not popped open, they just opened. Hey, everyone. To Evelyn's great surprise, Nell's eyes opened and latched onto her, sending a cold chill straight into her spine. It spread to the rest of her body, paralyzing her. Where's Evie? Nell asked. I miss her. She's not here, Evelyn replied, not knowing what else to say. She licked her lips, finding it difficult to speak. She's quite busy. Nell's eyes closed again. Yes, she whispered. So busy now. Leslie had moved to the corner of the room. Grasping her only moment of privacy, Evelyn stepped to the edge of the bed. Hovering so close to Nell she could smell, not spell. Evelyn stepped to the edge of the bed. Hovering so close to Nell she could smell the powder on her papery skin. Nell! She whispered so eagerly she didn't even recognize the sound of her own voice. It's Evie. I'm here to see ya. Nell's eyes fluttered open. Evie? She asked, lifting her head up to glance around. Where is she? Right here, Nell. I'm Evie. Evelyn reached forward to touch Nell's hand, but stopped. Her sudden childish fervor settled. Touch Nell? She nearly gagged at the repulsive idea. She pressed a hand to her own head instead, feeling another headache begin. How could she shuttle through so many emotions? She felt as if she had no control. A flicker of recognition spun through the depths of Nell's aged eyes, but disappeared into the vague shadows of her withering life. I miss my Evie, Nell murmured, leaning back against the pillow. I miss her. Nell didn't even... I stumbled over that. I need a drink real quick. Say hi to everyone. All right, let's try again. Hey, everybody. Thanks for popping in. Hi, David. Hi, Nick. I miss her. Evelyn didn't even recognize her in death, and it hurt. Evelyn winced, hating herself for caring so much. Evelyn glanced up to see Leslie standing in the middle of the room, hands on her hips, and eyes narrowed with intense distrust. Evelyn ignored her, but backed a step away from Nell's bedside anyway. Nell fidgeted with the top of her sheet, blinking as she stared into the distance of the room, no doubt viewing images of her past instead of the lavish four-poster bed and crackling fire. Despite a pile of blankets to keep her warm, Nell looked cold, like she rapped on death's door at that very moment. I added an extra word. Nell looked cold, like she rapped on death's door that very moment. Evie, Nell whispered, slipping into sleep. She was all that mattered. I loved her. Time's up, Leslie announced, but stepped back when Evelyn moved, as if she feared being struck. Evelyn scowled. Oh, what did it matter? Nell had no real comprehension anymore. This had all been for nothing. She whirled around and stalked to the door, feeling like a fool that cared, a fool that tried, a fool that still hung onto ghosts of the past. She may not live through the night, Leslie called, stopping Evelyn just as she put her hand on the doorknob. I thought you'd like to know. I know what death looks like. That's not Evelyn, that's me. I know what death looks like. That's Evelyn. I know what death looks like, Evelyn snapped. Do you? Leslie asked. Then you understand that the real Nell died years ago, when you broke her heart. Evelyn's nostrils flared. She yanked the door open and slammed it behind her as loudly as she could, hoping that the explosive noise would overpower the painful thrum of her heart. Nell's weak body and diminishing voice felt as final as death had ever been, perhaps even as final as Mama's and Papa's. She's gone, Evelyn said, pacing back and forth across the privacy of her personal chambers with feverish... I kind of stumbled over that S. I'm going to redo it, because if you're listening, it'll take you out of the story. Pacing back and forth across the privacy of her personal chambers with feverish tenacity. She's gone, she's gone, she's gone. The role of High Priestess is mine. That's everything I wanted. Everything. My plan is finally falling into place. She raked a hand through her hair, but she didn't feel giddy. Instead, she heard only the wails of a frightened little girl in her head. Mildred walked through Chatham City without breaking stride, headed for Miss Holly's candy shop before Stefan awoke and required his blanket. Okay, I'm going to redo this. Because the scene doesn't specify who she is at the beginning, but it's not Evelyn, it's Mildred. So I'm actually going to change both the book and the audiobook. Mildred raked a hand through her hair, but she didn't feel giddy. Instead, she heard only the wails of a frightened little girl in her head. Mildred walked through Chatham City without breaking stride, headed for Miss Holly's candy shop before Stefan awoke and required his breakfast. Witches scuttled back and forth, wagons rolled through puddles in the cobblestones, and scrollboys called out from the sidewalks. New toll on the central highway. All witches must pay to use it. They sounded like they were announcing doomsday. A new toll? What could Donovan possibly need the currency for now? If he added another wing to his mansion in Ashley, she'd move to the Northern Network. Her mind strayed, not strained. Hey, David. I lost my spot. So I just gotta check a few things. Okay. We're good to go one more time. Let's start this over. In Ashley, she'd moved to the Northern Network. Her mind strayed to the Middle Covens. How would her witches react to the toll? Many of them used the Central Highway to transport their cotton to the mills. She made a mental note to contact her coven leaders with a warning regarding possible discontent. Mildred dodged a mangy cat and crossed the street, following the smell of sugar and melted butter wafting from Miss Holly's candy shop. Wide glass windows displayed hundreds of confections stacked in tiers, lining wooden shelves. A gaggle of children ran past, lollipops and brown bags clutched in their grubby fists. Mildred strode by them and stepped into the house of sours and sprinkles. It felt strange to enter such a frivolous shop so early in the morning. Her middle finger tingled. She glanced down to see Lavinia's quill, but didn't read the message yet, too distracted by the cacophony of colors and smells assaulting her. All right, I had like half a second of a pause that I don't think I liked. No, it's okay. I want to make sure it's not distracting. It would stay on her hand until she acknowledged it. Be right with you, a voice called from the back, and seconds later, a striking woman with dirty blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a plethora of necklaces and bracelets popped into view. Not unlike the candies in her store, she was a veritable display of color. How can I help you? I want to buy some candy. Ah! Sorry. My nose itched. Let me get a drink while I'm itching my nose. Here we go. We're almost done with this chapter. I want to buy some candy, Mildred said, running her eyes over a shelf of hard sweets that ran the length of the back wall. Well, you came to the right place, the woman said, spreading her arms. She wore a turquoise apron with ruffles that matched her bright eyes. This is my candy shop. I'm Miss Holly. It's good to meet you. Who are you buying for? I just created new caramels that I'm gonna do caramels, not caramels. It's very regional, but I'm just gonna normally say caramels. Who are you buying for? I just created new caramels that promise to be fabulous if I can stop my 3 daughters from eating them. Do you like caramels? No, I mean, yes. Mildred struggled to reply, unable to take her eyes off the sparkling dragonfly adornment in Holly's hair. Perhaps. Well, you'll love these caramels. You'd love, not you'll love. Well, you'd love these caramels. I'm going to offer them in vanilla, too. Is there something on my neck, or do you just like my necklace? Embarrassed to be caught openly staring, Mildred glanced away from a wide blue amulet nestled in Miss Holly's bosom. They're very nice. Oh, don't be embarrassed. Everyone stares at my bits and baubles. I can't get enough of them, truly. I'm like a busy biddy drowning in my jewelry. Indeed, Mildred drawled. That's not a drawl. Let's see. Let me recheck. Mildred is the character I voice the most, but I want to recheck her voice one more time just to make sure. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Where did we leave it? So I need to drawl the Indeed more. Indeed, Mildred drawled with one last awkward glance. I'm buying candy for a class I teach. They all pass their exam on basic household incantations, and I promise them a reward. Do you have anything that I can buy in bulk? Holly pressed a finger to her red lips and perused the barrels. Almost said displays. Where did that go? Okay, shoot, what is going on? There, I had the spacing too far apart. Holly pressed a finger to her red lips and perused the barrels of gumdrops, flavored fizzy packets, pretzels dipped in chocolate and coated with sprinkles, and swirled peppermints. A blackboard above each barrel identified the candy in red chalk. I know it, Miss Holly declared, beckoning with a wave of her hand that jangled her bracelets. I've got some sweet little treats that fizzle in the mouth. Everybody loves them. Think they'd like a caramel? Mildred purchased a large brown bag of the wafer-sized candies. I said wafer-sized. Sized. Mildred purchased a large brown bag of the wafer-sized candies and stepped out of the saccharine-coated air. She'd gone no further than 5 steps into the warm summer sunshine when a gathering. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm struggling today. She'd gone no further than 5 steps into the warm summer sunshine when a gathering crowd in the middle of Market Street caught her attention. It's true, a young voice yelled. I heard it with my own ears, I tell ya. They sent me this message for the editor, the chatterer. Give it here, an older witch demanded. Mildred walked up in time to see a scunny. Oh my gosh, you guys. Whoa, today's one of those days. Woof. An older witch demanded. Mildred walked up in time to see a skinny young boy dive out of the way when several witches reached for a rolled up piece of parchment in his hand. No, he cried. I'll only give it to the editor. The high priestess isn't dead, you little liar, the old witch yelled. You're just trying to get attention, that's all. I'm telling ya, the high priestess is dead. Yeah, we'll see soon enough. Mildred stopped walking. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. The high priestess is dead. Oh my gosh. My nose is so itchy today. I got it. In an effort to get away from the ornery old witch that kept swatting at him, the young boy, whom Mildred recognized as the fire boy from the castle, nearly backed into her. She grabbed his shoulder and he whirled around with a yelp. Whoa! He threw his hands over his head. Not ya! I swear, Assistant Mildred, I didn't do anything wrong. Don't glare me into ashes. Glare you to ashes? She asked incredulously. What are you talking about? The boy peered through his skinny arms. They say that your glare will turn a witch to ashes, he whispered, gulping. I didn't tell lies, I promise. I don't want to be a pile of ash. Calm down, she said, grabbing the sleeve of his coat before he could squirm away. I want to know what you're making such a big fuss about. What is this about the high priestess dying? He hesitated. You won't turn me to ash. Not if you cooperate. They sent me to the chatterer with the message. he said, tightening his puny fist around the flattened scroll. The High Priestess just died. They're going to announce it with bells any moment now. Why are you telling people in the street? She asked. He hesitated, glancing around. Must have slipped out, he said, shrugging with a feigned innocence. She rolled her eyes. I can't help my mouth. Mother says it's going to get me in all kinds of trouble someday. Go right to the chatterer, she said, releasing his coat. Don't stray again and don't speak a word. Do you understand? Yes, assistant. The growing crowd hummed with whispered questions. The old witch, his steel gray mustache bristling, held his hat in his hands and asked Mildred in a quiet voice, Is Sweet Nell dead then? Mildred met his eyes, hesitated, and looked at the young fireboy's back as he wound through the busy, store-lined street. Lavinia sent a second message to her Selenda. Nell is gone. It would appear so, Mildred said, then transported away. Cool. The witch is dead. All right. Nell is the high priestess in the world of Alcara, and she's died, which has big implications for our antagonist and our hero, Mildred. So we're going to go right into chapter 32 now. Let's see how we're doing. Everything looks good here. All right. Hey, guys. Thanks for popping in. All right. Chapter 32 is titled A Good Show, and it's a little bit shorter than this last one. Chapter 32, A Good Show. Oh, just good show, not a good show. Good show. Councilmember Eddie of the Western Covens listened to Evelyn for one reason, her intoxicating promise of land, power, and wealth. If any other witch had requested such a bold favor from him, Eddie would have laughed. Evelyn, however, possessed social position, experience, and above all, a willingness to share a little power. Okay, I want to make sure I haven't voiced Eddie before really quick. I have. So I'm going to make sure I can match his voice. That's not Donovan's fault. He's got a really deep kind of marching tone. So we'll just match it, and here we go. Why are you doing this? He'd asked when she'd approached him in a pastry shop far from the castle. She'd leaned closer to him, her red hair spilling over her shoulders like strands of fire. The scent of cinnamon wafted from her body. Because we have to make our own luck, don't we? Which was precisely why Eddie wanted to help Evelyn achieve her goal in whatever way he could. In a roundabout way, making Evelyn High Priestess would funnel more currency and influence to himself, and nothing appealed to him more. So he'd signed her binding to help Grant convince the High Priest that Evelyn should be empowered as High Priestess in Nell's wake. Eddie strode down the hall toward Donovan's office, sandwiched between Grant and Evelyn, ready to earn his place in what she called the new Central Network. It was a budding idea, of course, kept under wraps in the strictest confidence. New laws, new taxes, new leadership. The Central Network could certainly use an overhaul. Eddie wouldn't deny that. The maids had opened the windows, allowing... Hold on. Yeah, like, made a whistle S. The maids had opened the windows, allowing the warm air of summer to blow through Chatham's dank corridors and bring new life in the bitter wake of Nell's death the day before. Grant kept glancing at Evelyn, but she didn't seem to notice his fervent attention, captured in a swirl of thoughts and plans, no doubt, and it was altogether quite awkward for Eddie. Do either of you have questions? She asked, lifting an eyebrow. I need both of you to convince Donovan without being obvious. The opinions of his friends always sway him more than his own instincts. Understood, Eddie said. Grant nodded and dug around in his pockets for his tin of tobacco, a slip of white paper ready in his free hand. Evelyn stopped to straighten her dress, check her hair in a mirror, and let out a long breath. Grant adjusted his necktie, patted back his hair, winked at his reflection, and fidgeted again with his tie. Hurry, Evelyn ordered, already on the move. We haven't time for you to preen all day in front of the mirror. There's always time to look presentable, Grant said with mild insolence. Calm down, Evie. We have this under control. Evelyn didn't say another word as they approached Donovan's door, but her eyes twinkled with a mischievous excitement when when Grant. As they approached Donovan's door, but her eyes twinkled with a mischievous excitement when Grant, why can't I do that? Her eyes twinkled with a mischievous excitement when Grant rapped on the door. Oh, it's because going from when to Grant, it's kind of a weird tongue. Donovan's door, but her eyes twinkled with a mischievous excitement when Grant rapped on the door. That sounds so funny. Grant rapped. It's okay. Grant rapped on the door. There's a lot of lip movement there. When Grant rapped on the door. But actually, I think it came out sounding okay. "Don't disappoint me," she mouthed, tucking out of sight. Grant and Eddie stepped into Donovan's office with a chorus of friendly greetings. "She's a bit mad." Nope, that's not his voice. "She's a bit mad, isn't she?" Grant muttered when the door had closed. He turned all his attention to Donovan, who waved them over to his desk with a sweep of his arm. Eddie squirmed, having no idea what to say. Luckily, Donovan was in a bright enough mood already, which Eddie took full advantage of. "You're looking good today, High Priest," he called jovially, sitting in a plush velvet chair just across from Donovan's desk. "Have you found a new tailor?" S- Hold on. This is Eddie speaking. Okay, I gotta start back a little bit. Eddie was speaking, not Grant. I gotta find the right spot. There we go. Which Eddie took full advantage of. "You're looking good today, High Priest," he called jovially, sitting in a plush velvet chair just across from Donovan's desk. "Have you found a new tailor?" "Scoundrel," Grant said. "He better not have. I've sent him to the best already. He just lost a few pounds is all. Are you on a diet, High Priest?" A plate of bread and luxury cheese from the dairies of the Western Coven sat on the desk at Donovan's fingertips. Yes," he mumbled through a mouthful of crumbling cheese. "A diet." Eddie leaned back, hiding his grin by rubbing his upper lip as if it itched. "We've come to discuss some business with you, old boy," Grant said as Donovan's assistant, Harold, passed around a decanter of dark Ipsum. Eddie and Grant both accepted a full glass, while Donovan took the bottle and set it next to the glass at his fingertips. "Business?" He scowled at them. "It's too early for business." Eddie's eyes strayed to the clock, just past 2 in the afternoon. He remembered Donovan as a shrewd witch, not this fat, crumb-strewn buffoon reading scrolls on hunting supplies. Donovan hadn't become high priest by accident. He used to play the political game well, using his vast knowledge of intricate magic to set himself apart from the rest of the council. The best Eddie could figure was that years of dark Ipsum and a debilitating knee injury had taken their toll. "It's business that will only take a second," Grant said, reassuring him with a wry smile. He clapped Eddie on the back of his shoulder. "Eddie here wants to know where to find the best hunting ground, as he takes the sport very seriously." Donovan's scowl dropped, replaced by a wide grin. I found a spelling mistake in my book. There we go. It definitely happens while I'm narrating. Replaced by a wide grin. "That's the kind of business I like," he cried. Eddie grinned and lifted his glass of Ipsum in salute. Donovan roared with laughter, downed his own glass, and gestured for Harold to refill it. "And here I thought you were serious about work. I get so tired of doing network business, you know, especially with the sad case of Nell dying. Seems like it's all just piling up now." Grant sobered. "Of course. That must be putting a great strain on you. How are you holding up, Your Highness?" "Terrible," Donovan said, reaching for another slice of cheese. "I can't decide who to put in as High Priestess. It's not an easy decision, you know, and the council members are down there talking and gossiping and—" "Don't worry," Grant said, gesturing to himself and Eddie, who had fallen silent in surprise. "We're here to take some of the burden off your tired, capable shoulders and help you out. Who are you considering? Sometimes an outside opinion helps shed more light." Donovan perked up. "Good idea," he said. "A good idea indeed." Eddie made a silent note to watch himself. Donovan had just played right into Grant's capable hands without Grant once mentioning the position of High Priestess. Eddie felt suffocated by the abilities of these masters of subterfuge. No telling what they could, or would, do. Grant leaned back, lighting the lazy cheroot that dangled between his soft, full lips. "Tell us your thoughts," he said. Then you can decide, and we can get back to important matters such as sport and manliness." "It's simple," Donovan said. "There are 3 female council members that I could appoint: Gloria, Terry, and—" He stopped when Grant ruffled his nose and puckered his lips as if he'd eaten something sour. "What? Why did you make such a face?" Grant hesitated, glancing at Eddie, and finally said after a long deliberation, "I do hate to be this kind of witch, but Gloria? Is she truly in the running?" He looked to Eddie for backup. Eddie licked his lips and hoped he could measure up to such superb acting. "Gloria is, well," Eddie let out a heavy sigh. "She's not very attractive, is she? An ugly high priestess wouldn't be popular. She could turn public sentiment away from the network leadership, which would be a shame, especially since you're so handsome yourself." "Nell was a lovely woman," Grant pointed out. "Have you seen how the network is mourning her? Gloria's looks impress no one. It seems like a risk." "Not to mention," Eddie said, "that Gloria has a bit of a problem." His eyes widened, and he mimicked her drinking a flask. Donovan recoiled. "No, does she really?" Eddie nodded, his lips pressed together, relieved to find his act had passed. Grant shrugged. "Seems risky to institute Gloria," he said. "You're right," Donovan said. "Can't have a council member with a drinking problem. No honor in that. How about Terry, then?" He gazed at them in studious concern. "Terry?" Eddie repeated, searching madly for an excuse against her. In truth, she'd make a wonderful high priestess. Steady and dependable, she'd pulled the Eastern Covens out of a lumber crisis 10 years earlier. But she wouldn't guarantee Eddie power. "She's old," Grant said. "At least in her 60s." "So?" Donovan retorted sharply, as if he were personally offended. Insulted, not offended. "So?" Donovan retorted sharply, as if he were personally insulted. "What's wrong with a little age and a leader?" Grant smiled. "Absolutely nothing, except it means she'll die sooner. It's hard on a network to lose leaders so fast." "You'll want younger blood," Eddie said. "Someone who can stay in the role for a long time and keep the network steady. The good gods know it hasn't been easy for you." Donovan relaxed, sinking back in his chair in thought. "Suppose you're right." "Pamela would have been a wonderful high priestess," Grant said. "But you replaced her a few years back with someone else. Who was that again?" Donovan's eyes flashed with something akin to panic. "Evelyn Ringer," Eddie said. "And a good choice it was. Why, look at how she's turned the Ashley covens around." The high priest's sudden anxiety faded. "Evelyn Ringer," Grant murmured, rolling the name around. "Evelyn Ringer. Now there's a candidate for high priestess if I've ever met one. Attractive, young, capable, knows everyone there is to know. Best socialite I've ever met. She can throw a party, too. Remember the Yule Ball Donovan put her in charge of a few years ago, when Nell started feeling really ill?" Grant asked. "With the ice sculptures? Who doesn't? Magnificent pieces. The swan was my personal favorite." Donovan said nothing, but seemed to sink deeper in thought. Eddie and Grant didn't interrupt, letting Donovan's thoughts flow for a few minutes. "She's very young," Donovan said with hesitation, showing a spark of intelligence in his face. "A lot of witches would oppose it." "More will object if you put in Gloria." "Definitely," Eddie said, keeping Terry's name out of it. No reason to bring her back up if Donovan was hesitating. "Gloria is a mess." I'm going to redo that part. "Gloria is a mess." Donovan hemmed and hawed, stuffing cracker after cracker into his mouth, his gaze focused elsewhere. "Porter would have something else—" No, let's redo that. The pause is too long, it sounds like a hesitation. "Porter would have something else—" Oh, not else. Why do I keep saying that? That's about done in this chapter. "Porter would have something to say about Evelyn getting the position," Donovan said, spewing crumbs on the rest of the tray. "But Porter isn't the highest witch, is he?" Grant gave a droll smile. "Don't be afraid of your power, old chum. Embrace it. Instituting Evelyn again isn't against." I like voicing Grant. He's got a really round, fun, full voice. Instituting isn't against instituting Evelyn. Jeez, it seems like when I mess up today, I mess up a lot. Old chum, Embrace it. Instituting Evelyn isn't against the Esmelda scrolls, is it? No, Donovan said, brightening. Not at all. Well, there you go. You would do nothing wrong by putting Evelyn in as High Priestess. What does Porter know anyway? I'm simply instituting the best replacement for Nell, Donovan agreed with a murmur. Evelyn's a bit bossy, though. Eddie didn't dare respond because he agreed. Apparently, Grant felt the same way, for he paused before replying. You'll need a woman with a firm hand to take over when your knee is acting up, won't you? She may be bossy, but she gets work done. True, Donovan said. Bad knee and all. What does your gut tell you to do? Eddie asked, fascinated by the stages of rationalization. I always stumble over that word. He asked, fascinated by the stages of. Oh my gosh, why can I not do this one? I'm going to go back a little bit so my voice can be flowing into that word. Eddie asked, fascinated by the stages of rationalization Donovan moved through so quickly and with such ease. You tend to make the best decisions. Donovan always does. Why else would he be the high priest? Right, Donovan said, wrapping his hands around his girth and clearing his throat. Feels good. Let's do it. Make it happen, Harold. Call Evelyn in for a meeting this evening. Of course, Your Highness, Harold said from the other side of the room. Good show of leadership, Eddie said with quiet applause. You've made the right decision. A drink to celebrate, I think? Grant asked. Almost said. We're going to redo that line. We're almost done. A drink to celebrate, I think? Grant asked, waving a decanter of dark Ipsum from where he stood at the far wall. Always, Donovan cried. To the network. Now, let's talk about hunting locations. Awesome. Okay. That finishes out my hour of narrating today and the chapters I had a goal to do. So thanks for joining me, everyone. We got through chapter 32, and the next chapter is a bit longer and will require like half an hour. So we're going to just end now. So thanks for coming. Thanks for everybody who popped in. And